Hi, and welcome to another section. This section is dedicated to outdoor safety, and it's how we deal with our outside environment. It's a way of us looking and preparing for whatever may occur out there, and this is just to give you an overview as to what you may or may not encounter. There's a lot of things that potentially can happen in the woods, but you can mitigate those or lessen them. You can lessen the impact. And it's just about being prepared and knowing what to do if the situation occurs. But I want you to think for a second about what the scenarios that you would face in the outdoors and how would you handle them. If you encountered someone on the trail, or if you encountered a snake, or just think about those issues for a second. And I want you to mentally think about, like, okay, how would I react? Everyone reacts differently. Some people say, oh, well, I can handle anything. Until you're put in that situation, you won't know your reaction. Most people, if they encounter a situation out on the trail, depending on how bad it is, there can be a lot of things happening, like your internal adrenaline may be going 90 to nothing. So just right now, think for a second, like, where you would go and what you would encounter. There's so many wonderful places in and around Monticello, and there are also places where we can stay safe. However, Monticello does have some off the track places where you can get into issues, and you don't necessarily have to go far off the trail in order to get into issues. You could potentially be right down from your house and get into something. As animals and outdoor safety scenarios occur everywhere. We deal with critters and insects and all kinds of different things all the time. And this is just to get you thinking. It's like, okay, what can I encounter? Is there a bee around my house? Is there a snake that's hid under our trash pile? Is there a bear that has meandered into our neck of the woods and may be a problem? So these are just a few of the scenarios, but I want you to come up with your own. And think for a second, if you were in a critter's place and you came across one of us, like humans, how would you react? It's like, here's this crazy big tall critter on two legs coming to me. It's like, how would you react? I mean, it's kind of like us having a giant, like Paul Bunyan or one of those that we know from our childhood. It's like, can you imagine someone like that coming around you? It's like, how would you react? You would probably be fearful and probably go the other way, and it's pretty amazing to think of. Or a dinosaur. I mean, if we came across a dinosaur and how big and ferocious they were, or supposedly ferocious, just think about how you may occur. Take a little bit of time and think about those things that may or may not occur, and maybe even just do a little essay or a little blurb on putting yourself in another critter's shoes and seeing it from their perspective. It's a good little way of seeing it from their point of view. But there's a lot of things that we can have happen in the outdoors, but it's we have to be observant. You can't go into the woods distracted. And sometimes when we're very good with outdoors and we know what we're doing is when we can get into the most trouble. But if you're observant and if you pay attention and you treat it with respect, the outdoors can be a great place to reconnect and to get back to wildlife and to see cool critters around you and hear cool critters like this. There's a bird around me. I think it may be a northern parula. There's a creek behind me, and we can enjoy these things. I mean, yes, outdoor safety can happen, but most of the time, if you're like the normal person, you won't have any trouble. And it's also about using your head. It's not only about being observant, but use your head. It's like, okay, is this something that will get me into trouble? Like climbing this tree back here, is that something that will get me into trouble? You harassing the snake, will that get you into trouble? Just don't do things that you know are going to bite you. Don't go on a 10-mile hike when you've only done 1 or 2 miles in your neighborhood. That's just not a smart thing to do. Stay within your abilities. The time to test your abilities is if you have a place where you're right by phones and when you're in your neighborhood and near help. Then you can push and test your limits, but don't go from, well, I'm going to run 1 mile today to running 10 and 20 miles. That's as a human, you have to progress and go up and not just go from 1 to 20 miles. It'll cost you. It'll cause you to probably overheat. It'll cause you to cramp up big time. Your body may not react the way you want it to. You may hurt a limb. There's a lot of things that potentially could go wrong. And when you're tired like that, usually you do not very bright things. So just use your head, stay within your abilities. And being as ready as you can. You plan and prepare is a big one for outdoor safety. If you plan and prepare ahead, namely look at the weather, figure out what's there, what am I getting into, what trail am I taking or potentially taking, what can I potentially run into, and go through the different scenarios in your head, like quickly. I mean, when I go outdoors, it's like, okay, well, I'm going over to the Lake Talcon today and going on the trails. It's like, what can I encounter? Well, there may be a snake, there may be an alligator, I may run into bees on the trail, I may run into a pig. The trail may be washed out, and so I have to hop over water and other places. And so I try to get different things and be ready for those. I put on my hiking boots, and it's like, if I get wet, I get wet. Is it going to rain? Do I take my poncho? So those are types of things that you get ready for. And also pay attention to your body. Your body will let you know that you're pushing it. Like if all of a sudden you're very fatigued and vomiting and have all kinds of issues, that's probably a good sign that something's wrong inside. A big one for dehydration, we'll get into dehydration and heat issues, but is dry mouth. Do I have enough water? Don't ever go anywhere without having a bottle of water with you. It's just not a smart thing. It's really easy to pack it in. Don't try to rely on a store or stopping at a gas station. One, it's very costly to do that, and two, it's time consuming, and three, there's not a 7-Eleven on every corner, especially if you're in the woods. So unless Mr. Beaver is serving up a nice round of water near his lodge, which doesn't really happen. So just keep that in mind when you're going out there. But yes, you can be silly if you want to. And think of the possibilities of what you potentially could encounter. Just like Dr. Doolittle or whatever, go with a raccoon and say, hey, you don't mess with the beaver. So yeah. But on a hot day, if it's a hot day like in the dead of summer in Florida, you know it's going to be hot. You know it's going to be humid. So the best way to alleviate hot days is to go early in the morning, go in the evening, or be on a trail that is not completely exposed by the sun. You're going to still have sun and heat to deal with, but it won't be as bad. And just remember that you'll go through water a lot quicker. So what are things, I want you to right now list the things that your body may tell you when you encounter heat problems. Like what, I want you to name them off. There's a couple of things that come to my mind immediately. So what are they? There's dry mouth, there's sweating, you can get red in the face, you can get fatigued a lot quicker. If you've ever exercised out in heat, your body tends to fatigue a lot quicker and get overheated way quicker. So those are things that you have to watch. Is your body cramping? Are your muscles cramping? Are your legs, for whatever reason, cramping? Lots of sweating and then no sweating at all. That's another really, really bad sign. That means you're really dehydrated and probably in the stage of heat exhaustion or heat stroke, which we're about to get into. But it's you need to watch out for these things. So dehydration, it's usually you have a dry mouth, and you're wanting more water. Like right now, I am dealing with a dry mouth, and what my body normally does is if I haven't had a lot of water, I tend to have a headache. Not a migraine, not a lasting one, and then I down water and the headache usually goes away. If that's not the case, then I would get out of the heat and consume water and stop what I'm doing. And this will also cause heat cramps. Heat cramps is the first heat-related illness that you may find. And heat cramps is when your body loses a lot of fluids and what are called electrolytes. But the best thing to do is to take in water. If you have Gatorade or a sport drink, take one of those. But it's your body's way of saying this is the first stage of heat-related illnesses and you need to be aware. It's not one of those situations where you have to turn around immediately. However, if it progresses further, then yes, but just keep in mind also that with these illnesses, they can progress very rapidly from one to the next, and then they can progress not so rapidly. So just be aware of that. So it starts out as heat cramps, and then it'll progress to heat exhaustion. It's where your body doesn't have enough coolness to cool it back down. It's where your body is having so much heat that you can no longer keep up with it. And so your body is reacting. You'll have fatigue, you'll be nauseous, you'll be red in the face, your heart rate will speed up. And so this is a sign when you need to get in the shade. You need to take a 30-minute break and see if you can have things go back down. Can you make your red face go down? I mean, it's like doing what you can. And out in the woods, I mean, you could potentially, if this is all I had, I would take my shirt and I would put it in the water because there's a creek behind me, and put it over my head, and that would cool me down. And I would take fluids in as much as I could. If you have a lot of layers on and it's 100 degrees out, that's you potentially could take off all those layers. Don't go naked, but just you potentially could go down to your underwear if you needed to. If you have a body of water and you're overheating, and that body water is safe and you can see in it and make sure there's nothing hostile that's in it, then you can go for a swim, and that's a great way of cooling down. That's why in the afternoons that people will go swimming. So that's a very good, cool thing to do. If you don't allow your body to cool off, it could progress to heat stroke, and that's where your body is not able to do what it needs to do anymore, and your life is now not good. It's in not a good situation, and you need to get to the hospital and cool down immediately. It's where your regulating or internal systems are not able to cooperate anymore, and they start shutting down. And it's a life-threatening emergency. You have warm, dry skin. You have a rapid heartbeat. You have a loss of appetite. So if you know you've gone all day without food and you have no appetite whatsoever, that may be a sign. Fatigue, confusion, you don't know who you are, what you are, why you're out here. These are all signs that you're in not a good state. And if you're a friend and you see these, you need to pull that friend away. And you know immediately that it's heat stroke if all these things are happening and it's the dead of summer. So cool that person off as quickly as you can, and get in the shade. If there's body water, put them in the water. Put clothes in the water and put them back on. That's a great way of getting heat-related things under control. However, that's if you're dealing with heat exhaustion or heat stroke, that's when you stop whatever you're doing and proceed back to the trailhead or the starting point and get out of there. These are also times when you need to seek medical attention because your body has been hurt, and they need to look at you immediately, especially with heat stroke. That's not, if you're in a place and you're near a phone and you have heat stroke, you call 911 immediately. I've seen many people at like Wakala Springs or wherever, and they've had this, and it's not a good situation. You let people know if you're dealing with these things. And when it progresses really rapidly is like if you are in the sun and basically you go to sleep, and so you get a really severe sunburn, which is also not fun. And you get blisters, potentially you can get blisters on your body from sunburn, and you can do a lot of harm to your body with sunburn. So make sure that you have on sunscreen, but just make sure that you're doing the right things and trying to control the amount of heat that your body is taking on. And the opposite of these, they do happen here, is cold-related issues. Usually if you're doing something, it may be a spur of the moment, and so you may have a tingling sensation. Your extremities get very cold. They could also, if it progresses, your skin starts feeling very waxy and whitish looking, and it can progress to a lot worse if you don't jump on it. And people that have climbed a mountain or been in really extreme environments, when they've been stuck, it can go to life-threatening things like having gray, and they could potentially lose that arm, because if you have red blood going, think about it, if you have red blood going through your veins all the time, and that's why you're producing some of this brownish. But think about a person when they lose functioning of an extremity, or if they pass on, what do they turn? They turn white or grayish. So it's basically the loss of a pulse. In cold situations, your heartbeat slows down. So when you're dealing with frostbite, you can do exercises. You can go 1 and 2 and 3, and you can run. You can do jumping jacks. You can do any kind of thing, push-ups, sit-ups, in order to warm your body back up. Do whatever you can to warm it up. The two great places, if you're, usually this happens with your hands or with your legs, but you can put them under your armpits. That is a great way of getting them back warm. If you need to, you can stick them in your crotch. That's another big time heat source. So, and put on other layers. If you're near a house, or you can add more layers in order to alleviate some of the coldness, do it. I've been in skiing places where I was on the slopes and just needed to warm them up. And what you can also do is you can move those appendages and move them and recirculate the blood through them, and it helps quite a bit actually. And so you can do that. And this, a lot of times, like, it's when you don't realize frostbite can happen when you're not moving them and you're having fun. Like if you're skiing on a slope going downhill, it's a whole lot of fun, and you don't move your hands as much, and your hands become very frozen. That's why mittens are very good, because what it does is it keeps your fingers together. If you have fingers on your gloves, it makes it so each finger is isolated, so it's your hand is not able to warm up as efficiently. Another cold related thing, which can happen here even in 50 and 60 degree weather, is hypothermia. It is basically what happens when you can no longer get warmed up. It's your body starts to get colder and colder and colder, and if you don't do something about that, your hypothermia can go from just a little discomfort and I'm cold, to I'm freezing, to mumbling, to stumbling, to bleh, and you fall over and you're dead. So these are not good situations. Hypothermia, it's basically, if you're in a hypothermia state, what you want to do is get out of anything that is wet. So if you have on clothes that are wet, or are very cold, then well, if they're wet, then you take them off. But if they're cold, you put on more and more layers, or more and more insulating layers. A cool thing that you can do is if you're in the woods and you need to warm up, you can stuff your shirt with leaves. You can just take like handfuls of leaves and stuff them up under your shirt, and that will provide an insulating layer of warmth to you. I know it sounds a little weird and crazy, and you go, well, there's things all over those leaves. It's better than being cold. I've never tried it, but I've seen a whole lot of survival videos where they've done it. So that is hypothermia. So if you're dealing with hypothermia, it's a situation where you deal with it. You put on a fire, you deal with it, and if you don't proceed to stumbling and fumbling and those other more extreme areas, you can keep going. If you're in a place where you can stabilize your internal body temperature. However, if it keeps free falling and going down and down and down, that's when you seek medical attention as soon as you can. However, if you're way out in the woods, what you do is you try to get warm. You put that person in the heating or in a sleeping bag and any blankets and whatever. I know this is gross, but body-to-body contact is a great way of having that warmth. It is, in that situation, it's needed. Even if you have to, even if it's coat-to-coat contact, if you've ever curled up with a dog or any type of critter, you know that the combined warmth warms you up. So just keep that in mind if you're really cold. So other emergencies as you're going down the trail and stuff that I have encountered. One of the most often ones that I would encounter is I take a step wrong. Like I will tweak my ankle to one side or the other, and it will hurt. And if it's just a very mild sprain, you'll feel a stretching of your outside, and it'll hurt a little bit, and you won't be able to walk right for just a little bit. You'll feel a tingling type of sensation, and I mean there are different ways that this can happen. But you want to see if you're able to put your weight on that limb without it hurting. If you can't do that, then what you need to do, or what you can do, is if you're in a situation and you can no longer walk normally or effectively, what you can do in that situation is get your trusty stick, if you're in the woods, or any type of item where it's very rigid, where it's not going to break. This is a stick, and what you do is you put the stick here, and you get your rope, and you can tie the stick to your leg, and you can get out of there. If you're with other people, which is highly recommended when you're out in the woods, what you can do is you can help each other and get back. And also, if I was also in this situation, what I would do is get another stick and use it as a hiking stick, so it'll help support some of that weight and get it off of the leg. And you're trying to protect that your ankle, and there are wraps and things that you can do. I don't mean like rapping like like the rappers do on music. I don't mean that. What I mean is there's a bandage that's called a roller wrap that you can basically wrap around your ankle and support it to where it's more not moving. And you can even do it with your shoe on. Your shoe will help support it, so you can actually do it over your shoe. And it's highly recommended to keep your shoes on if you're in that situation, and so you can get out. And so that would be, and that's also if you break your lower leg, you can do the same thing. If you go down the trail and all of a sudden you really do something stupid and end up with a broken leg, and it may be just fractured. What may happen is it may have shooting pains, and if you're able to move it and you feel the bones kind of give away a little bit, so like this, it means that you have a fracture and you don't want to mess with it anymore. There are bigger fractures and bigger bone breaks. Like if in a really bad situation, if you see the bone sticking out of your leg, that's what's called a compound fracture, and that's a really bad situation. What you do in that situation is you don't set the bone back in. However, there are emergency certifications that will do that. However, if you're not trained to do that, what you do is you immobilize that whole entire leg, like with a stick, and then what you do is you cover up that exposed bone, and you try to make it so that bone doesn't move. You keep off of that leg and you try to hobble back. Because if you try to put it back, what you may do is you may either A, hurt the bone that you're trying to save, or you're going to rip open more of your flesh while getting the bone back in. I know it doesn't sound pretty, and it's not pretty, but it takes a pretty major incident to have happen. So hopefully that won't happen to you. If it does, then just try to treat it as best as you can. You'll be in a lot of pain, and you just try to minimize the pain as much as you can. Take aspirin or whatever you need to, and get your rear end back to the hospital. So, and also another thing that you may do is you may trip and fall, and you may try to brace yourself, and you end up breaking your arm. So what you can do in that situation is two things you can do. You can get another stick and put it here, and tie the stick on like you would normally. And what you can also do is, while it's is like this, what you can do is you can take your jacket or whatever you have, and you can do this number, and it'll help stabilize that arm and help you get out of there. If you need something more, what you can do is I can take the line and have it go under the elbow and then around my shoulder like that, and have it go down, and so it's around that elbow, and so it's another way of supporting that arm. So that's something you can do for a broken arm. Something that I tend to do is when I'm out in the woods, I get cuts and scrapes and I don't realize they're there until I'm back in the car. Sometimes they do because they sting. But if you have a stinging sensation and you just have gone past briars and whatever, you can treat those, and it's probably preferable that you treat them. What you do is you just get all the dirt and whatever, and you dust them off. Like if I had dirt all over my hand, what I do is I dust it off, and I would treat that wound. I would cleanse it out, and put, if I were to put water on it, it would be water from my bottle. Never put water from a stream or whatever into a wound. You're talking about giardia and all kinds of other nastiness getting from the water body into your arm or cut. So clean it up, and if it's a bigger gash, what you can do is, if you have super glue, what you can do is you can put super glue in it. I know it's not the most sanitized way of doing things, but it will help seal off the cut and get you back. I have heard of that happening. If you have a really deep cut, what I would do is cover it up and not try to squeeze it shut, because what will happen is if you squeeze the top shut, there'll be a cavity inside. They'll be hollow. It'll be like that, where it's hollow inside, and it won't close up properly. So with that, I would just irrigate the cut and cover it with sterilized gauze, or as clean shirts as you can. You can put on bandages like this onto the cut and stick it on there and keep going. So that's always nice to have. If you ever, for whatever reason, have anything go in your arm or in your body and it's sticking out, like for instance, if I were to have a knife and I were to do whittling or whatever or something, and I was trying to cut something and it suddenly went in my arm. So if it did this number and it were sticking out like this, then what I would do is I would wrap this with whatever I could. So I'd wrap it up so it is protected, and so nothing else is going in it. If I had other clothing, I would take them off and use it as a way of making it so that blade doesn't move. Just think about it for a second. If that blade is moving, what's happening inside? It's gouging your insides, it's cutting more, it's making bigger damage. So that's not a good situation. And you never take it out, because what may happen is if it's hitting, you have arteries going down your arms, and if this thing is in that artery and cutting off that blood, and you pull that knife out, now you have an open artery that's probably spurting blood all over the place. So every time your heart beats, it's going spurt, 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 spurt. And that's not a good situation to be in. You're now in a situation where you're losing blood, which can be a very dire and bad situation. It can have you go into shock, and so you can't get out, because originally you just had a knife in your arm. Now you're dealing with blood loss and potential shock, and a lot harder of a time to get out. Because if you lose consciousness because of going into shock or losing lots of blood, that's a lot worse of a situation. And shock is basically if you have something happen, and it's basically a shock to your system. You'll be pale. You could your heart rate basically stop, or doesn't stop. It slows way down, and your rate of your heart goes down, and so that's not a good situation. So keep the arm there, keep the knife in there. One thing is burns. A lot of the time we have burns happening to ourselves. We're outdoors all day and we don't realize that our neck is burnt, and it's like really it feels very hot after we've been out all day, and potentially it could hurt to the touch. Like if it hurts to the touch, I'm sure most of you all that are watching this have gone through that. You put aloe vera on it and burn cream. However, if it's starting to blister and be worse, that's what's called a second-degree burn. If it's just red on the surface, kind of like a sunburn, you're all right. You can treat it, and you'll just not be able to like lay on your pillow for a little while. If it's on your back, you won't be able to lay on your back. I've had that happen when I was a little kid. I couldn't lay down on anything. It hurt really bad. So just treat it. A second-degree burn is something that probably won't happen in the sun. It's something that may happen around a campfire or a stove. If you're outdoors, or if you're around a hot engine like an ATV, UTV, it can happen that way. But basically you have 3 layers on your skin, or the skin is composed of 3 layers, and the surface level of your skin is hurt by first-degree burn, so that's the sunburn. A second-degree burn is when that second layer of tissue is involved, and basically you're talking probably about a blister that pops up, or multiple blisters that'll pop up, and it's sometimes those blisters burst, but usually they stay intact. You don't burst the blister. You also don't put ice directly on the blister. You can put your hand under, if you can stand it, under cold water, and just keep it going. So because even if your hand is away from the heat source, that your flesh is still burning, and you have to cool it off and stop that burning. So you have to take it away from that source and figure out a way of cooling it down with ice pack, with cold water, and just figuring out a way. And it's a lot harder when you're on the trail. If I'm near a water source, or if I've just been burnt, I will try to use water or whatever in order to stop the burn. Third-degree burn, I've never seen happen in the woods. That doesn't mean it won't happen. That means that the person's probably been sitting in the fire for a little bit. So that's not a good situation, but probably one you won't encounter. But it's where the third layer is affected, and that's when you definitely seek medical advice. Even with a second-degree burn, you may want to have the doctor check it out and make sure that everything's okay. So those are burns, and potentially can happen outdoors. However, if you're on a hike, I seriously doubt that that'll happen. You may encounter a sunburn, but that's about it. The way to alleviate sunburns is by putting on sunscreen every 2 to 3 hours. You can't put on sunscreen once a day and expect not to get burned. If you're out there all day, you need sunscreen multiple times a day. If you're go in the water, reapply the sunscreen. In Florida, skin cancer is very bad here. You can get little places on your skin that are brown, and they can grow. And those are skin cancer called melanoma, and it's something you do not mess with. Everyone in my family has had melanoma on their, but you can remove it. But if you have a brown spot and it's growing and having irregular edges and starting to change color, that's when you seek a doctor. If you're going down a trail and all of a sudden, I mean, there's all kinds of noises happening continuously around you, from birds chirping to maybe something rattling in the bushes, to things crawling all over. If you start hearing a lot of buzzing, and I don't mean just one buzz, I mean lots of the buzzing all together, there may be a hornet nest near you, and it's a very good thing not to get near that hornet nest. Hornet nests usually have hundreds of hornets that will fly out of them, and I'm sure you've probably seen the cartoon where the hornets go after the person, and the person jumps in the water and they escape the hornets. Not a good situation, and can get you into an allergy situation. If you deal with allergies, hopefully you know what sets you off, like a bee sting or an ant sting or whatever. If you're unsure, don't mess with that critter. Like if you've never been stung by a hornet, then what you do is you watch that person. If they get stung, you need to watch them. If things start swelling up, that's a sign that they are having a reaction, or if they're starting to have slurred speech or whatever, or if their throat starts closing, you need Benadryl immediately. Benadryl are small little pink pills. You can get all kinds of these at your nearest pharmacy or Walmart or wherever, and it's always good to have on you, because you don't know what your body's reaction will be to outdoors if you have not been in it. So always keep Benadryl with you. Very important. If you're the type of person that's allergic to everything under the sun, including the sun, then you need to carry an Epipen. And well, the outdoors is probably not a good idea for you anyway, but hopefully you're not that allergic. But if you know that your body reacts to external stimuli, other things from the outside, then you need to carry an Epipen. And an Epipen, yes, they're expensive, but it will save your life. And it's always good to have on you. And you need to let your leader or someone know, if you're in a group, that you have it and where it is at all times. And with an allergy reaction, it's always good to follow up with your doctor. Hopefully you're not in a situation where that allergy gets serious to the point where you're not breathing. If that's the case, you get to the emergency or find help as quickly as you can. You call it in, whatever, and you get life-flighted out of there. Allergies are not something to be messed with. Another thing you can run into out in the outdoors is poison ivy. It's the 3 leaves, let it be, and there's 3 leaves that are with it, and they're all green, and they all come off of the central portion of the stalk, and it's always on the ground or running up the side of a tree. And it is something that not everyone is allergic to. Most people, when they encounter it, get a rash from it. However, if you touch poison ivy and are near some kind of water, what you can do is you can put your hand in that water and try to rub it off. Because what it is there's a liquid on the outside of the leaf that your body comes into contact with, and your body has an allergic reaction to that liquid. And so what you try to do is you try to get that liquid off your skin. And I've been successful a lot of the time, where I knew that I encountered poison ivy, so I wash up and try to scrub it off. However, there's a lot of other times where I've not been successful. You can spread, I mean, I know there's a lot of research that says otherwise, but you can, if you scratch one area and go to another area, you can spread it. If your body still has that liquid on it and you're scratching from one area to the next, you're going to spread that poison ivy all over your body, and it's not a good thing. It is very itchy. It's something you don't want to get, and you have to control your body's reaction, saying, you must scratch, you must scratch. I know, and you'd probably be holding your hand going, no, you can't do that. So yeah, we also have poison sumac, which is, if you touch it, you can have an allergic reaction. It's something that I have not come across a whole lot, and we'll talk more about different plants in our environment as in another sec. If you're going along the trail and you hear, see and hear a rattling noise in your path, or if you come across something, or if you're sitting down like me and all of a sudden the snake comes up from behind, and you do something and you scare it and it decides to go after you, it potentially will leave puncture marks in you. We have, I can't remember if it's 5 or 6 venomous snakes here, and they're all under the same family except the coral snake. The coral snake is a snake that is in a different family. It's actually related to a cobra, and it's red on black, friend of Jack. So red on yellow, kill a fellow, red on black, friend of Jack. And that's basically their bands. And if red is touching yellow, that is a coral snake. If red is touching black, that is a milk snake or a scarlet snake, and won't harm you. It can still bite you, but it doesn't have venom in it. But if you're tagged by one of these critters, thankfully they do what are called dry bites. It's where they don't give you the venom that they have inside of them, and it's because they want to use that venom later on. You're just an irritant that they just want you to go away with. However, if it's a younger snake or a baby snake, there is a misnomer that baby snakes have more venom in them. That's not the case. It's basically they don't know how to control the injection of that venom, and so they give you everything they have. And I, sadly to note, was bit on the foot. The 2 prong marks don't show up immediately. They appeared after I got to the hospital. But if you're ever bit by a venomous snake, get to the hospital immediately. Don't mess around with it. And in that situation, you try to limit the amount of anxiety going through the roof. You limit your adrenaline rush. You don't drink or consume any caffeinated beverages or any other beverages other than water or Gatorade or fruit juice or whatever, and you get to the hospital. It will hurt like crazy almost immediately, and it depends on how your body reacts to that external venom going in you. It did hurt like crazy when I got bit. It will make life not fun for the next couple of days, and for the next month your foot will hurt. I tried to put on shoes for a month, and it hurt for a solid month. Not a fun thing to be bit by. However, 80% of the people that get bit are messing with the snake. 10 or 20% are not messing with the snake and just happen to be at the wrong place at the right time. So just keep that in mind the next time you're outdoors. But this is just, I mean, this is a lot of what you'll encounter on the trail that you need to be aware of. There are things that we don't have here that may happen out west that you need to keep in mind of, such as they have altitude sickness, which is where you're going up a mountain and you start getting really lightheaded and fatigued and start getting confused, and that's your body's way of saying, I don't have enough oxygen going to my brain, please turn around and go down elevation as quickly as possible. And it's called being acclimated. I mean, you can acclimate to your environment out there, so it is something that we don't deal here with. We don't deal with it often, but fires are something that you may or may not encounter. And it's if you see smoke and it's and it's just keeping an eye on it. If it starts out as a little smoke signal going straight up and then gets bigger into a bigger cloud and a bigger cloud, that's when you make for the exit very fast. Fires, depending on what environment they're in, can grow very quickly. If it's a forest, they have a tendency to grow slow, but if it's in an open field, they have a tendency to grow a lot quicker. Think about wind. If wind is able to hit those flames, it'll propel them a lot quicker. But with forest, there's not really a whole lot of wind, so it's less likely to get bigger. But this is just the general stuff, and there are other videos on the site about watch out situations and leave no trace and fun little worksheets and outdoor scenarios. And you should try your hand out, at some of those different scenarios and see how you would react. It's like to be ready for something, it's always good to try stuff beforehand, like mentally think, okay, what would I do in that situation? And now that you've listened to me, I want you to take this time and think, okay, well, how would I react in the woods if I got bit? How would I handle a scenario where the water was rising very quickly and I was cut off? We do encounter hurricanes here. We do encounter flash floods occasionally. So you gotta think of those things, and it's like, okay, what would I do? And also you gotta think of how are you ready for them? Do you have extra bottles of water? Do you have a way of listening to news sources? Do you have a way of having a light source and extra batteries for that light source? Do you have a way of making a fire if you need fire? Do you have a way of cooking? Do you have food that you can eat right out of the can? Do you have a knife or a Leatherman? Very good thing to have. But just be ready for whatever comes. And with hurricanes, they let you know that they're coming. And we know long ahead. And I wouldn't wait till the last second to go, okay, well, I think I'm leaving now. Don't do that. And it's probably, if you're in a situation where you think, oh, well, it's better for me to leave, then leave. There's a wide variety of circumstances that people have gotten themselves into because of staying around. But it's just about being ready and being ready for those challenges. And I'm sure every one of you can handle this, and it's just about using your brain and not going, oh, well, I can't do this, it's too hard. Don't give up. Don't just sit there and go, oh, I can't do it. Just be ready for it. Life can throw a lot of different curveballs at you, and it's just about being ready for them. It's about doing what you can do in order to get through life. Life has a lot of outdoor safety or safety type things that you got to be aware of all the time, especially when you're in your car. You don't know how that other person's going to react in their car, and you'd be ready for something not smart by other people. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you down the road with another video. So take care. Bye.